networks, right? So I'm going to go in and I'm going to create, I'm going to add a new network, and I'm just going to call this network VirtG. Now, I can set this to external, I can link it to an individual physical card. If I do that, it's going to link to that card, and all traffic that goes through that network is going to be passed out through that card. Or I can do an internal only, or I can do a private. That's only available to that virtual machine network. So I'm going to do an internal, I'm going to call it VirtG, and I'm going to say OK. Now, notice what happens in the background. When I get over here, it's actually added that local area connection 4, which is VirtG. You see that? Actually added on my parent partition, on my host, added a new network. It looks like, from my host, that looks like a new physical network card, doesn't it? Okay? It's exactly how it shows up. But what happens is here, because it's an internal network, that's only visible to the machines that I link it to. So what does that mean, the machines I link it to? Okay. So let's take a machine here. Let me take SharePoint 2007 Bug SharePoint Server. I'm going to go to Settings on this. And you'll see that right now the network adapter is linked to the CEI 2010. So that's my other internal network, my demo network. Notice I have a demo network, and now I have a VirtG network. That's the network I just created. To link it to that, I simply go there and I link it to that. Now, the only machines that are going to have access to that network are the other machines running on this box that also have access to that network, because that's an internal network. Everybody with me?
It's its own switch.
It's its own switch. And right now, the only server on that switch, there's 2 servers on that switch. What are they?
Host.
The host, and that's one VM that I've just set. And if I went and set up a different machine on that, then it would be able to communicate on the same network. That's exactly right. So I'm going to say OK to that. And now the host and the guest can communicate on that virtual network. Now, I'll get to your question in just a minute. Now, if you think back at my architecture slide, remember we had the slides showing all the different networks up there? So what's actually happening is we've got a direct path. The host and that one guest are on a dedicated network. If I go and add another machine to that, say I put the 2010 server on that same network, I go switch that over to be on the VirtG network. Now I've got 2 guests and the host on that same network, and those 3 machines can communicate with each other, but with nobody else, because it's an internal network. If it were an external network, then all 3 of those over that network would be able to communicate with the rest of the world. Everybody got that? This is where okay, that's a good thing to do. That's the secure thing to do. If you need those machines to communicate with each other, fine. Okay? That's the way to set it up. What if those machines need to communicate with the outside world? You need to put them on an external. Now, this is the key point that I wanted to make. If I put them on an external, so let's go change this network adapter. And let's go put this on an external, and we're going to link it to my gigabit card. Or my gigabit network card.
Out to the wireless?
No, I don't want to do that. No. I'm not going to do that because I'm going to screw up my other demos. So I don't want to do that. But if I were to do that, if I were to link that to that physical network, what would actually happen is now I have 2 VM bus. I have more than 1 VM bus network, virtual network, running on the same switch that physically have access to the same wire. Does that mean, let's assume that my CIE network was also on this same physical switch, or my main network, you saw that, my demo network, we're on that same switch, and using that same external network interface card. My question is, would those guys be able to communicate with each other? Yep. Yes. So my next question is, what do you think the chances are of them being able to communicate with each other before it hits the wire? Because that's really where your security question comes in. At what point do those networks actually get merged? If you think back, let me see if I can pull this architecture slide up again real quick. If we look back at the architecture slide, that's this guy here. If we look back at the architecture slide, what we actually have here is we have this scenario. right? Because this is VirtG, this is the CIE, this is the demo. Those are 3 different VM buses. They don't come together until they get down here on whichever network that I'm sending them out on. Okay? While they're on the Hyper-V host, they are isolated. They don't actually get unisolated until they hit the wire. That begs the question of, can one sniff the other? Kind of, yes, because they can sniff it, but not until it hits the wire. Once it hits the wire, it's wide open. It's on the same physical wire. It's going through the same switch. If you need segregation from that, just put them on a different physical NIC. Now, even if you have them on a different physical NIC, if that physical NIC is plugged into the same physical switch in the back end, you're going to have the same problem. They can still communicate because those signals are going to merge on that external switch. Okay? So just all stuff to think about from a security standpoint. How isolated do you want it to be? While it's sitting on the host, it's isolated. Once it hits the wire, snip away.
Can you segment via VLAN?
Yes. And both legacy and the VM bus one, the new one, you can. Yes, Dave.
It doesn't allow you to have 2 NICs on VM.
Yes, you can have up to 4 NICs on a VM. And in fact, that's what I do in my demo environment. Because I set up, on every one of my demos, I set up 2 NICs. I set up one as my standard internal network, and the second one I set up, I use for my internet. Okay? I have an internet, so then if I want to use my internet, I just activate that NIC, and whenever I don't need that internet, so I keep it secure, and I don't have you guys out in the audience hacking me, right? Which you do, I know. What I do in that environment is I just disconnect it. So that network on the virtual machine just shows it's disconnected. Because I go into the virtual machine properties, the settings, and then I tell it's not connected on the virtual machine. And I'll just show you where that is. So if I'm in
you could theoretically make a machine look like a firewall.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely the whole point. You can make a machine look like a firewall and be a firewall actually.
That's what I meant.
You can virtual. Not theoretically virtual.
Run the traffic through that machine.
Yes. So you'll see here, even on this machine, I have 2 networks. I have a network adapter here and I have a network adapter here. This one is showing not connected because I've selected not connected. And whenever you select not connected, it just looks like you physically unplug the network from the switch. That's all the VM sees. Yeah.
Where's the IP addressing come in here? And is it V4 or V6?
You tell me. It depends.
Yeah.
What's our question? What's our answer to every question that any user ever tells us?
Yes.
It depends or it should.
It depends. Well, if you're saying yes every time somebody asks you something, we need to talk. If you're saying no, well, we probably still need to talk. The best answer, the one I use all the time, is it depends. Okay. So the question was, is it running IPv6 or IPv4?
Depends on the operating system you use.
What operating system are you on? Does it support IPv6? Do you have IPv6 enabled? If you do, the switching on Hyper-V will support it. So yes, you can use
But who's
IPv6.
serving the addresses?
Yeah, where's these?
That depends on you. It depends, man. So who's serving DHCP? Well, if you're on an internal network, it better be either your host, right? You guys know that, not your host. So that means it better be one of your VMs that are also on that network. Otherwise, you're never going to get a DHCP.
So the host should be static.
So the host should be static, not necessarily. Because, remember on my host, I have like 8 NICs on here. I'm not going to have every one of them static. In fact, if you look at my host, let's go look at my CEI, whatever it is, network on my physical host. Do I have that up still? I do. If I go look at my CIE network, and I go to properties on this is my demo network, and I go to IPv4, what do you see? It's dynamic. Where is it getting this IP address from? My DC, which is a guest on that internal network. So why doesn't that DC interfere with my external network whenever I'm in the office where I get an IP address from the DHCP server? They're completely isolated. They're not on the same network. One is never going to see the other. Problem. You set up a DHCP server on a virtual machine. Oh, I just need to grab something off the internet real quick. I'm just going to switch over.